leader of Babergh District Council, and will be chairing this meeting. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements. Please ensure that you maintain social distancing from all other persons whilst in the chamber and in the communal areas. Please ensure that you wear a face covering at all times unless you're sitting down, or if you're exempt from doing so, and that you use the hand sanitizer and wipes provided. Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers or hold separate conversations whilst others are speaking. If you are attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please ensure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And finally, we'll be using e-voting for this meeting on the modern.gov app, so please could members make sure they are logged in and ready to use the app. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Before I move to the agenda, I would like to have just a minute's silent reflection for the victims of the atrocities in Ukraine. Okay, we'll now move on to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have received apologies from Councillor Holt and also the Assistant Director for Planning and Building Control.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare? No. Right. Item 3, paper BCA 2140, the minutes of last month's meeting will defer until next month. There's still a number of matters that need to be resolved before we're in a position to propose and agree these minutes. Item 4, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
And item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees. I understand, Councillor McLaren, you wish to say something?
Thank you, Chair. You have in front of you the draft minutes of the call-in on the 21st of February 2022, which I hope you have read. However, Chair, there's just one or two things I'd like to add. The co-signatories, we actually left off the minutes, and I think it's important that people know who the co-signatories were to the call-in. That was Councillors Melanie Barrett, Trevor Cresswell, Mick Fraser, Jane Gould, Margaret Mabry and Mark Newman. Basically, the call-in was about three things: the lack of detail within the proposed expenditure of 150,000. Because it was over 150,000, it was a key decision, and so the signatory felt there was a requirement for the Cabinet to explore all circumstances surrounding that decision. And there was also a lack of in-depth questioning into the various aspects of the 150k by Cabinet members, as it was a public forum. Chair, in addition to this, I would like to draw the Cabinet's attention to the options that were open to the committee, which many members may be familiar with or not. there was 3. And the first one, refer the matter back to the Cabinet for reconsideration together with the observations of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Cabinet will then take a final decision and that decision cannot be called in. The second option was seek the advice of the monitoring officer as to whether the decision is contrary to or not wholly in accordance with the policy framework or the budget, and if applicable, refer the matter to full council for a final decision. Option 3, that the decision be upheld and implemented immediately. We were advised by the monitoring officer at the meeting that option 2 was not applicable. And option 1 sort of really stopped any further calling. So at the end of the debate, the committee resolved that the decision taken by Cabinet be upheld and implemented immediately. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren, for that. Moving on, item 7, the forthcoming decisions list. You've all had an opportunity to see this. Does anyone have any questions on the forthcoming decisions list? If not, then the decisions list is noted as it is. Thank you. Item 8, paper BCA 2141, the General Revenue Account Financial Monitoring for 21 to 22, quarter 3. And I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce this report. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you very much. Yes, we have a presentation of the quarter 3 out-term position, which I think Rebecca is giving. Sorry, Catherine.
No, apologies. The Cabinet Member usually introduces. Sorry.
So you'll have to forgive me. I'm still on tie times. Right. So the recommendation that we have before you is the recommendation 3, 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. Basically given the quarter 3 out-term position, which currently stands at a surplus of 741,000. You'll see that is made up in Appendix A with the variances that are duly noted. These variances obviously make up a lot. The big ones that are probably worth noting are the planning and development, extra income coming in from that, which has been favourable. Again, also on that side, there is a deficit in the amount of labour or wages or salaries because of the reduction in the numbers. And we've seen an overall, we're around 15% overall down on our normal position had everyone been filled. But that is an ongoing, and it has been decreased. It was 17, so we've seen a 2% reduction. We have made appointments in the subsequent period, and that's obviously in terms of that will reduce that over a period of time. I think the good thing though is that we're seeing that the budgets in certain areas are accurate, but there's just those anomalies there which should create this 741 surplus. I think I'd like to. It depends where we end up in quarter 4, but if we carry on that trajectory, we should be seeing probably into nearly the £1 million mark. So I would like to propose that we note this. It is only for noting, and that's item 3, 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3. And can I have a seconder, please?
Councillor Busby. Thank you. Okay, so questions. Does any Cabinet Member have any questions on this? Councillor Busby.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the level of staff vacancies. 15% is pretty high. I just want to know what percentage of our total underspend, the 741,000, is due to reduction in staffing costs because of the vacancies. I couldn't find anything related to the money on that.
There's one, but there is a table there which shows the actual 15%. I think if you look at 6.7 on the staff vacancies, it does give you the vacancy rate and the grand total. It doesn't give an amount.
740,000 is a big number to be underspent, but if it's 739,000, that is due to the fact that we haven't filled 15% of our staff positions, then it isn't such a big number, is it?
It's not that great. The actual staff percentages are there. In terms of where the money is, if you look at the Appendix A, you see the difference. And I think majority, you've got 300,000 in the planning side, then there's a combination of staff shortages, which you'll see in the bracketed figures. Just, they don't add up to the vast amount, it's just collectively that obviously we have got shortages. It's not the major where most of the money's come from.
Ooh, I don't know about that. I think I'd probably question that. If you've got 15% of your staff...
I defer to Catherine. Could you give some support on that one? Because I think overall, I would say it's 15%, but in numbers, but I'm not sure what it actually is in pounds, shilling, pence.
I don't think I've got the definitive figure, but there's a couple of bits I can perhaps add. When we were just looking at the changes from Q2 to Q3, I know that an extra 200,000 is due to the staff vacancies. The other factor within this is that we do have a 5% vacancy factor within the budget anyway. So 5% is already accounted for in the budget, so it would be that extra bit over and above that is attributed to the savings. We would need to go back, I think, just to see if we can put an absolute figure. You'll see in Appendix A there's quite a few different service areas talk about their savings, so it might be a case we might just need to go through and add those up and then take off the vacancy factor that we hold centrally. So we'll do that outside of the meeting and let you know the answer.
Councillor McCraw, did you have something?
Exactly the point I was about to make. In Appendix A, if you start off with communities and well-being, you can see that the reasons, the comments given in the final column, 165,000 in staff vacancies for community development. If you go further down the table, you'll find some places where there are net increases in staff and agency costs. There are a variety of these sectors indicate that there has been an underspend in staffing, and as it's suggested, you could add them all together. Economy and business, 53,000, 4 towns visioning 21,000, licensing staff costs, then there's an agency cost to cover a vacant post.
Sorry, Alistair, can I stop you there? Because that isn't the only reason for that variance in that particular line. It's not all down to staff costs.
Not at all, but it is an indicator, and I'm pretty sure that...
Adding it won't give you the answer to the question that I asked.
Okay. It's an indicator is all I'm saying. That's all we can have at this stage, I think.
Councillor Barry, did you want to say something more?
Yeah, I mean, despite that, I mean, we're still functioning okay as a council. It's just that, and there's also, you have to take into account the certain amount of churn that you'll always get within the staff positions. So and that will affect, depending on what quarter it is. If it falls within the quarter, it's not so bad, but if it falls outside one quarter and in another, you'll then see that effect coming through.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? Councillor Busby.
On page 36, there's something I wasn't quite sure of. It was related to, it says, where is it now? On law and governance, electoral services and land charges, there's an information management line which says that income from HMLR for transferring LLC1 to work to central location, we've saved £75,000. I didn't understand a word of that line. If somebody could explain it to me in words of one syllable, please, Emily.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's to do with land charges. Yeah. Yeah, do you want to? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. So this is to do with part of the land charges search being transferred to now being dealt with centrally by the Land Registry. And as part of that, they awarded unring-fenced new burdens funding to local authorities as part of that data transfer. So that's the leftover sum after we've taken out our costs of preparing the data for transfer.
So that's just a one-off. We won't get any next year.
Okay. Do you have another one?
Somebody's read the papers.
Yeah, I've got a question as well in a minute.
And on reserves, we've got a table of general reserves. I just wondered whether we could combine some of them. There are some that are related. For instance, we've got rough sleeping, temporary accommodation, homelessness. I wonder whether those could be combined into one reserve. We've got two lots of planning. Okay, they're slightly different. Just to make the table smaller, but make the reserves more flexible in their use.
The rough sleeping, I think, probably needs to be separate. I think that was a separate heading because it came in as a separate one-off payment. So I think that's why that's there as a separate heading. I think that was government money that came directly. It was ring-fenced just purely for that benefit. So that's why that's like that.
I understand that, but I mean, the difference between rough sleeping and homelessness is thin.
The trouble is you get to a position where you can give too much information or not enough. But I think when you have a separate line in a report, especially for something like that, where it's been funded as an outside body, not necessarily from I think you do need to show that. And I think quite a few of these do suffer from that type of reserve type nature. So I agree with what you're saying. In that general area, it'd be easier just to put it as one. But I think because they are separate income streams coming into the council, I think they have to be shown separately.
Yeah, we've had a number of grants from the government for rough sleeping and homelessness to tackle specific things and to allow us to do specific things. They are, we do need to keep that money separate, as indeed we need to keep the reserve for temporary accommodation separate. Although I take your point, it's all to do with the same sort of thing, but there's completely separate activities with separate sources of funding. And while rough sleeping is a form of homelessness, homelessness is far wider than rough sleeping. So we do need to keep them separate.
And elections fund and elections equipment?
I'm not sure what. Does anyone, Catherine, Emily, can you answer?
I'll happily take that question again, Chair. So the elections fund is for the annual reserve contribution that's made every year over 4 years, and then it's spent in the 4th year when we actually have an election. So the cost is built up on an annual basis and spent in the 4th year. And the election equipment reserve is there for whenever we have to outlay on new replacement ballot boxes or something like that. So if we have to make a large purchase of replacement election equipment, the money's there to fund that. And then we're able to recover part of that cost from national elections. So when we make claims for national elections, we can claim back a proportion over the lifespan of that piece of equipment.
I've just got one quick question of my own. 6.17. I can't quite reconcile the numbers there that in the capital programme relating to SIL and Section 106 monies with the corresponding numbers in Appendix E. I was just wondering if anyone can provide some clarity on that, please. Councillor Barrett or Catherine. 27 for 6.17 and Appendix E is on page 43 for Appendix E. not the overall adverse variance for the capital programme, but just specifically the items relating to SIL funding and Section 106 monies. 368. In Appendix E, yeah, but at 617, it refers to. All right, let me go back there again. 505 for. What are you saying? It's 318 as opposed to 3. No, 318 is fine. But the 505 relating to the SIL funding and 362 for Section 106 monies stated in 617, but in Appendix E, the numbers are different. Catherine, are you able to?
So I think we'll take that offline and look at the detail rather than holding up cabinet. So we'll take that offline.
Thank you. If no more questions from the cabinet, Councillor McLaren, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Mine's about staff vacancies as well. The statement that the average vacancy rate to the end of November is 12% is a bit misleading, because then when you look at the detail, I think for the communities, housing and law and governance, the vacancy rate is important. And so my question is, do we have comparisons with the figures for 2019? And what do we think is contributing to the vacancies? Is it the dearth of suitable candidates, or the employment package is not competitive? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McLaren.
I think I refer that to the Chief Exec, because that's his area as paid employment.
Yes.
I had a feeling that was coming my way. In terms of the comparisons to previous years, yes, we will have it. I don't have that to hand unless Catherine happens to, but I suspect not. But we can certainly get that outside of the meeting. In terms of reasons for vacancies, it will vary massively. So it will be the reasons that you gave, but it will be other things as well. Percentages, of course, can be slightly misleading, because in a small team, one vacancy makes a large percentage. Equally, in a large team, that percentage would be more concerning. So housing, for example, may be more concerning, because overall that's a large service area. But when you then drill into where those vacancies are within that broader service area, they may again be in relatively small teams. So damn lies in statistics, I suppose, and we do need to be careful of that. But in terms of reasons for vacancies, yes, wages are an issue, and you have heard the conversation around that previously, and I'm sure we'll have that again. And there's a commitment from myself to carry out a pay review for all staff to look at salaries. The wider employment market is an issue. You will have heard, not just in local government, but in all sectors, the numbers of vacancies and the difficulty people are having to recruit. There are simply more jobs than people, which creates a challenge for local government, as it does in all other areas. Following the pandemic, what people are looking for has changed as well, so that the options around flexibility, for example, and certainly we provide a good package there, so we're an attractive employer in that regard, but people can work by and large where they want in the country, and one of the challenges and benefits of local government is that we're everywhere. And so somebody can be working here and then relocate to Cornwall and still be working in local government, which again presents a challenge for us overall. And then the other element I suppose I'd just draw out is the way in which we are set up in terms of the length of time that people have to give as a notice period versus the length of time it takes to recruit somebody. They very rarely overlap nicely. So inevitably, when somebody leaves, it takes us longer to fill that post than it would to before they've left. But we are employing more people overall than we have in the past. And obviously we've tupied people in more recently through bringing in the contract around public realm. And so again, things appear in our stats that might not previously have appeared in our stats, but it doesn't mean they weren't happening before, but you're just seeing it in a consolidated approach. But it's all of the above, absolutely.
Chair, can I just ask one final question? Thank you. I noticed that there was, I think, costs for temporary staff were highlighted. Do we have a figure for the whole of the council of what agency and temporary staff cost? Do we have a total amount? Have I missed it in the papers?
I don't know whether it was in the papers, and I'll defer to my finance colleagues on the right, but yes, we do. It's monitored on a monthly basis, exactly in terms of external staff that we're using, and equally whether they are supernumerary, so extra posts that aren't otherwise on our books, or whether they are people that have come in on a temporary basis to fill vacancies that are on our books. Overall, over a period of time, we've used far fewer external people, which is a good thing because, broadly speaking, it's expensive to use external people in that way on an interim basis. And also, it's not really helpful in the grand scheme of things, so we want to retain people and build up cultures internally. But there are times where it's entirely appropriate to do so. An example, and only because elections was mentioned earlier, every year we carry out the elections canvass. Those people would show up as being external people because they come in for a short period of time in order to do door-to-door canvass for a period of time. They probably aren't the kind of things you're talking about. But yes, we do monitor that on a monthly basis. Happy to provide outside the meeting if it's not otherwise. I'm glancing across. No, it's not. So it's not in the papers in front of you, but we can provide that.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll now open this up for debate. Does any Cabinet member wish to say anything about the General Fund report? Councillor Barrett?
Only that the obviously carried forward, which is puts us in a good position to be in. Again, I think what we're trying to do with the budget that we've just had presented was to try and get the budget in a more accurate position to reflect where we are, and this is exactly where we're seeing, if we looked at the rather pessimistic view of the budget that we had last year and now in our outturn position, I think what we're trying to do is get that into a more accurate position. Again, though, it just highlights the problem. Most of the time our expenses are fairly accurate. We know where we are with those. It's the income streams that we can't predict, and it does show up, and this is actually showing up here, of how much that does affect the overall position of the council.
Yeah, I fully understand and concur with that, and that of course has been exacerbated over the past couple of years with the COVID situation in terms of the government grants and the impact on other income streams as well. So, but in any event, what we've got here is still a good picture, and it's a good position to be in, and we'll be able to do something useful with this surplus when...
Just to come back, I mean, if this was reflected in, and we knew that this was going to be the surplus in the next, say, 3 or 4 years, then if you look at our medium-term financial position, which shows a 2.3 billion deficit, then that deficit would be turned on its head and we'd be in a neutral position. But we can't take that at its face value at the moment, so this is why it's slightly frustrating. And I think the sooner that we can actually get a 3-year settlement from the government at any one time, which would give us a far better position to be able to budget in a more accurate way.
Absolutely. And every council in the country is pressing for that. Okay then, if there are no further comments, then we'll move to the vote. Can we open the vote, please, Henriette?
Certainly, Chair. Members, the vote is now in progress. Councillor Dawson, are you still having problems logging on? No. Good. And Councillor Malvesi, are you able to vote electronically? Councillor Busby, have you voted? Have you? Chair, that's 9 votes for.
Thank you. Paper BCA 2142, the HRA financial monitoring for 21 to 22, quarter 3. And I'll invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce this report. Councillor Barrett.
Could be Councillor Busby. Anyway. Thank you, members. Yes, just to we have the quarter 3 outturn for the HRA account, as in your report, recommendation 3.1, 3.2. The point to note, and this is for noting, is that the outturn has got worse from the quarter 2, which was 499. We're now at 617 as deficit. Again, this is mainly caused by the increased charges for the housing repair bills. Again, in the future budget, this has been amended and increased. I think this is more to do with the budget being inaccurate, and also the effect of COVID, which has increased our costs, which has caused this. But apart from that, the overall position is as per we would expect. So I'd ask for ask for a seconder, please.
Councillor Osborne, second. Thank you. Okay, questions, anyone? Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. In the light of recent events and the fact that post-COVID, raw materials and building materials especially have sharply risen, are you making extra allowances in the budget for that moving forward?
Within the budget, there is an extra £500,000 being put in. So effectively, if you take this deficit and the other one, there's almost, I think I'm right in saying, sort of equates to about £1 million if you take, well, actually it'd be more than that now because the deficit's gone up. So we have allowed for it. But also, one of the other things that will hopefully kick in is the training that's going on to the housing repair teams, so there's less use of subcontractors. But I think, Gavin, would you like to give an update on that?
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. You're correct in terms of the increase in the budget that full council agreed in February will support, I think, approximately a 15% uplift on the building services responsive repairs and maintenance budget. That's in light of a very comprehensive review of the budget and expenditure over the past 4 years, so incorporating not only COVID but the years preceding, and as such we feel that the proposed budget for 22-23 is more realistic and achievable, even with inflationary increases or rises in material spend. Just as an aside to the reasons that you have set out in front of you at 6.10, we have been looking at building services in more detail in recent weeks. And as an example of why you'll be seeing an adverse variance for this year, this figure is for Babergh Mid-Suffolk combined, so apologies I don't have the Babergh figure, but up to the end of Q3, we had undertaken more than 100 additional voids in comparison to the year 2019-20, and that's still with a further quarter remaining. Now, on the basis that each void costs between £3,000 and £4,000, you can immediately see that expenditure will have risen by nearly 400,000 just through additional voids. And those additional voids, which invariably result in significant works being undertaken, no one can predict or plan for the number of voids. They will be subject to a number of reasons, such as, sadly, the death of a tenant or transfer to care or transfer to a new property. And clearly, as a council with ambitions to build and acquire more and more properties, you'll naturally see residents move and transfer as well. So it's just additional to support that adverse variance this year.
Thank you, Gavin. Any other questions? I've got one. 6.11, in the table at the top of page 49, we're now talking about a transfer from the Strategic Priorities Reserve of 10,000, 10.439 million. And it indicates that that's in the budget transferred from column. This is the first paper that we've seen this number. It wasn't in the budget back in February last year, and it wasn't in the Q1 and Q2 monitoring papers. Can anyone provide an explanation, please?
That I will happily transfer to Catherine.
Struggling just to find the right section in the report, but I believe it's to do with capital funding from the reserve, so to support, so it's an extra revenue contribution towards capital coming from the Strategic Priorities Reserve for housing.
Thank you. I thought that might be the case. It's just that this particular table at the top of the page is the only place that the number is mentioned.
Yes, I think we haven't shown it previously. I think we did when we put the budget paper together, and then I realised we weren't being consistent with what we were showing in the budget monitoring report. So we've brought that, made it consistent now in this report.
Right. Okay. Because it is significantly different, obviously, from the budget paper from just over a year ago. It's.
Yes, although we would have been earmarking some of the funding from a reserve for the capital then, but yeah, so it was probably an error in how we showed that table at the time.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Councillor McLaren, do you have a question?
No, thank you, Chair.
I'll now open this paper up for debate. Cabinet members, does anyone wish to comment any further? I know we talked quite a bit about the increased costs in the buildings and renovations and maintenance programme, but is there anything else anyone wants to talk about? In which case then, Councillor Busby.
Well, I think was bringing up here on the performance report. So I'll do it here. Housing association. We've got 3,443 houses. How many houses do housing association have in our district, roughly? Any idea?
Every association, every registered provider is different naturally. If you combined our stock with Mid-Suffolk's and look at it as a total sum, we're comparable to Orwell Housing and Havebury Housing locally.
I was trying to establish how many houses are either council and or affordable, i.e. assuming the affordable ones have gone to housing association. Is it 10% of total housing in the area? Which, no, it's more than that because we have 10% of council houses.
It's not a figure that I've got to hand, but I'm happy to go away and bring that back to you.
Okay, it's obviously not crucial. It's just that my mind was thinking we demand 35% affordable housing from new developments. Why don't we take those affordable housing and convert them into council housing? There's obviously a very simple answer, but I don't know it.
Well, the simple answer is we do sometimes.
We do, but we also have to buy them.
Yeah.
Whereas, obviously, where they're suitable, they might not always be where we want. I mean, this is actually more a question for the cabinet member for housing.
Yeah, I'll pass over to Councillor Osborne. She'll give you a full answer.
Well, I don't know about a comprehensive answer, but basically, it's every time properties come forward in a development on a 106, we bid for those properties, and if they meet with our requirements and our standards, i.e. are they in the area that housing need is the standard of the property up to our usual standard, then we will bid. We don't always win those bids. That depends on the developer to select the successful bidder for those properties. So in that respect, we do try very, very hard to acquire as many properties as we can from development, but it's not always possible, and it's not always right that we should do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the reason for thinking about it was I was thinking about our trying to make all our homes of a good standard, especially going forward in terms of carbon reduction. And it's easier to do that if they come under your responsibility than if there are third parties. I mean, I don't know what responsibility we have with housing associations to say you've got to spend money getting rid of gas boilers, you've got to put double glazing in, you've got to put solar panels on the roof, whatever. We do that with ours, but I bet the housing association don't do that with theirs.
Well, they,
We do. We are actually putting together a design policy, but obviously that will be for houses that we build. Now, the answer to your question, and the most appropriate answer would be that we build our own to put into our housing stock. But there, the availability of land is the critical one, and also getting it through planning. For example, we had a application that we put forward to the planning committee to build 5 bungalows for disabled access use, and it got refused. So we're restricted to, because of the land availability, we're restricted to bidding on the 106 properties for affordable housing, and there we're in the hands of the developer on the standards that they've met. Obviously we'll try and guide those standards, but that is down to the planning stage to make sure that those properties are up to a standard.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I think I'd like it to be included in a discussion later on housing generally. Not today, but next time we have a briefing, if we could consider these things.
Just to give you some bare numbers, so far in the current financial year, we have acquired 94 houses. 68 of those are social and affordable rent, because we also provide affordable rent as well as social rent, and 26 of those are shared ownership. Also breaking down that 94, 38 were delivered by ourselves, 54 were Section 106 acquisitions, and 2 were right to buy acquisitions. So there's a good balance there of houses we deliver ourselves and those we buy from developers. Councillor McCraw.
Just wanted to follow on with that. Am I correct, and perhaps Gavin or Jan can answer this, am I correct that we're actually shifting our model of housing partnerships in the near future, or considering less use of housing associations and more building in-house? Have I misunderstood that, or is that partly true? How much truth is there in that, I'm guessing?
Councillor Osborne?
Yeah, it's not really changing the model of it. It's acquiring what we can, when we can, in the right places for the right people. That's what it's all about. And as I've just alluded to, you know, the ideal option would be for us to build our own houses. That would be the ideal option, but it's not feasible because it's the difficulty in obtaining land to do so. You know, you've got big developers coming forward that have got a lot more money to buy that piece of land than we have. But that would be the ideal option. So we have to go with the second best option, and that's acquiring from developers and buying off plan.
On from that, I just had the general impression that our partnerships with housing associations in general were reducing, or were just, I don't know, this is what I'm asking. Is that correct or not? Gavin, perhaps you can help.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from Councillor Osborne's point, we are looking to maximise our own building capacity. There is an obvious example that when we look at Section 106 as a means of increasing our density or our supply, we are in a competitive bidding process, and clearly through that process it drives up the cost of those units. Those units of accommodation are inevitably always going to get built and always going to get acquired. So I think through the development of the business plan, what you will see is a drive and a move towards, wherever practicably possible, delivering new units of accommodation on behalf of Babergh residents, built by Babergh, to the highest standards that can be afforded and attributed. And that will be the direction of travel. However, there will be challenges along the way, and Councillor Osborne has already reminded you of the challenges around land. So that therefore means that we need to become even smarter and more agile in flight of foot in terms of our response, how we make best use of our existing land to achieve this outcome.
Thank you, Gavin. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, it's following on really from Councillor Busby's point. I think it was just over a year ago that I raised the point of the number of council houses that we had, our stock, how much it was increasing through acquisitions and how much it was decreasing through right to buy. And I think it was back in December 2020, Councillor Osborne kindly gave me an answer, but I think that we were going to have some additional information sent out, which I don't recall was ever done, with regard to the sort of the rolling total. And the reason that I think that might be a good point, it could just be coincidental, but at paragraph 4.4 it says the council's housing stock is 3,443 homes, and that is exactly the same number that was quoted in 2020 in paper BCA 1954, where it said the council's housing stock was 3,443. Later in the year we were told it was 3,418, and that's what prompted my question in December 2020. You've said that our stock has increased this year by 94. I find it unlikely that more than 94 homes have been lost from our stock through right to buy. So I think there's still a little bit of clarity needed about what our housing stock is and how those figures are updated. It seems to me as though this 3443 could actually be out of date, although it's quoted as the 31st of March 2021. So I think I'm sure all of Cabinet would probably appreciate a little bit of detail about what's happened over the last few years. I think we quoted back in 2017 a stock of 3,505. So it would be, you know, I'm quite interested, and it sounds as though other people might be quite interested about actually having some updating on what our stock is increasing by and why, which you just gave us the information yourself, but also what we've lost through right to buy and what our sort of rolling total is.
Thanks, Councillor Arthey. The right to buy sales, I think, were about a dozen in the past year, so we're looking at a net increase of around about 80. So that, you're right, the number at 4.4 is out of date, is a year out of date. But I take your point, it would be useful to have a more detailed breakdown of the losses and gains throughout the year.
Yeah, well, particularly because in the past we've expressed an ambition to actually build up our stock again. You know, we keep saying, oh, we're acquiring these homes, we're providing these homes. Some in my ward in Cockfield, 3 bungalows were provided this year, much appreciated, valued. But I think it would be quite useful to know what's happening. It seems odd to me that we're trucking out the same figure of 3,443 that we were over a year ago, unless, of course, it is coincidentally the same.
We'll take a look at that and validate that. But just to reassure you, Councillor Arthey, that 94 that I quoted for the current financial year, in total over the past 7 years, the number that we have built and acquired is currently 228. So that's since 2015-16. So it's a significant number. So yeah, we need to look at the overall total and make sure that it accurately reflects what has happened over the years. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other points of debate? In which case, we'll move to the vote then. Henriette, can we vote, please?
Members, the vote is now in progress on your app. Councillor Busby, may I take your vote verbally? Thank you. Chair, that's 9 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Performance report. And I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Customers, Digital Transformation and Improvement to introduce this report. So, Councillor McCraw.
Thank you, Chair. You have before you the regular quarter performance, BCA 2143, this being quarter 3. I don't believe you wish me to go through each of the infographics on every page. We've all had a perfect opportunity to examine them. I'd just like, if I may, to draw your attention to a few notes, perhaps highlights in each area, but I would always think it's best if the individual Cabinet Member take any question on their own portfolio with the help, obviously, of the officers. So we're looking back at the period from October to December, quarter 3. Significantly, it's the Christmas New Year period, which brings its own seasonality. That means the demands and requirements change ever so slightly. So this isn't an exhaustive list, but it will give you some indication of the progress made against our strategic priorities. I'm going to draw out maybe one or two pieces from each sector. In the economy, for example, the virtual high street continued to grow, with over 1,600 vouchers being downloaded over the Christmas campaign. In the environment, this is rather more negative. We saw an increase of 4.85% from the previous quarter of contaminated recycling waste. Now, we've got a waste management officer in place now to review the recycled waste contamination and develop an action plan to address this issue. It may be that that's seasonal because of changes in usage in Christmas, but I think we need to look into that. It's not a good position to be contaminating so much of our waste. In the customer's portfolio, my own, I'm pleased to report that we saw a reduction in both the abandon rate of 8% and, more significantly, a reduction in waiting times down to 2 minutes 22 seconds. That's still not the target we have, which is 1 minute 45, but it's a heck of a lot better than 3.5 minutes, which it had been the previous quarter. There are other things in that portfolio I could add to the chatbot increase, which is something that's definitely rising, and we are rolling the chatbot out to more and more functions, having started with waste management. Our online forms are reasonably well rated, 77% give them 5 out of 5, and there's an increase in people choosing to use them. Those are the main ones for that area, I believe. In communities, the CCTV system has now been installed, with further work being undertaken with the police to make sure that areas of towns are monitored and to identify possibly vulnerable members of the public. In well-being, an event held at Hadley Pool and Leisure has been organised for 50 plus. I mean, we always talk about swims for kids, but it's nice to see a rather older group being catered for as well. Oh, no, I'm sorry, I have to say I like swimming. I think it's a very good piece of exercise. And it's obviously going to help improve health and well-being. Housing has obviously already been mentioned, and I know Gavin referred earlier to the number of average days to relet standard voids. The housing team are aware of this, but obviously it's not great at the moment, but there are good reasons for it. Health of the organisation, we've seen an increase in the number of days of sickness. We're a little higher than we should be, from up to 5.36 days, compared to 2 other comparable councils at 4.63 and 4.52. However, I think that's something of an outlier. In previous quarters, we've usually been under the local averages, from memory. Anyway, I'll take any questions on my own portfolio and direct any questions for the other portfolios to that portfolio holder and the officers, if I may.
Thank you, Councillor. First of all, may I have a seconder for the report? Councillor Davis. Yeah.
The report's only for noting, I believe, Chair.
Oh, it's only for notes. Sorry, I was reading the wrong one here. My mistake. Councillor Davis, your question.
Yeah, thanks. Just on the last point that you made about staff sickness, and in that particular quarter, I appreciate it went up a bit. Are you able to drill down a little bit on the mental health aspect of that and the percentage of staff and whether that's decreased?
Who would be who would be the best person to answer a question on the health of the organisation?
Probably Cathy.
Cathy, thank you.
Yes, I can confirm that the numbers of mental health sickness absence related cases has reduced, and actually as of today we have nobody off sick with mental health related absence.
Thank you. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, just questions on a couple of points. There are items that were mentioned in the environment report for sort of scheduled completion after Q3, and I think one of them was listed as January and one as February. I just wonder, we've got Cassandra Clements with us, if she could perhaps just update us on the backwash water treatment works at Kingfisher. I think they were scheduled to be completed in January. And the tree canopy survey, which I think originally was going to be available around about October, November time. I think there's a report coming to us on that, which we haven't had yet. Just wondered if we could have an update on when that's expected as well.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. My colleague Sharon is just checking on the water filtration system, but I can say in terms of the tree canopy survey, it was delayed. There were some COVID delays, unfortunately. However, we're hoping to bring something to informal cabinet around April time, so we're very close to that being published now. If you can just give us a second, we might be able to come back to you on water filtration.
Thanks, Cass. In the meantime, does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Bosby.
Well, a general one, really. We talked some time back about improving communication, and we suggested, or I think I suggested, that each month we issued one of these sections and sent it out to the parish council so they could get a feel as to what our objectives are. Because the stuff that they get at the moment, the monthly reports, are really just news flashes which they can get off the website. Whereas this will see and tell them what we're trying to do and what direction we're going in. It effectively means if you've got 6 priorities, they'd get an update twice a year.
I think that's a useful suggestion, something we could probably look at. Councillor McCraw, do you have a response to that?
I think we can examine it, I think, with officers and see if it's feasible. I do have one concern about it, in that we say that we each here are dealing with a series of snapshots on a quarter, and a quarter doesn't necessarily describe outcomes for the full year. And the second point is that we are, in the second quarter of next year, going to be presenting an entirely different method of presentation focused on our outcomes. So to use the existing presentation we have now and start rolling that out when we're about to change it ourselves seems a little bit wrong way round. I think we could look, though, at the outcomes framework perhaps being communicated to parishes in some way. I'm not entirely convinced separating it up into just one section is, I think it could be misleading, but I think it's something we'll discuss in the directorate, if that's okay with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, I seem to recall in the not so distant past that there was going to be a new section, if you like, where the individual portfolio holders gave more depth and explanation on their portfolios, and I was delighted to be able to do that for my communities and well-being team, because they do such a fantastic job. But it seems I was the only one that had the opportunity, and it hasn't been continued.
That intention at council meetings is going to continue, so there will be an opportunity for others to do that at council meetings going forward. Yeah. But everyone else will get the same chance to show off in the course of the year. Okay, Councillor Barrett.
It's not really are we in questions, or where are we? We're not in questions, are we? Are we on debate? Oh, it's only for noting. Oh, well, that's all right. Then we're not really, because it's not really a question. I'm trying to sort of get my head around where we have customers as opposed to residents as a heading. A customer is someone that buys and has a choice in the service that they are providing money for. And I just wonder whether we've got this terminology correct by saying they're customers. It's only a little bit of a technical point, but I'm just wondering, you know, if you look at this, you say, well, a customer. Well, to me, a customer is someone that, you know, comes into your premises and says, can I have a £1/4 pound of pear drops, please? And you say, that is 99p, and he says, thank you very much, and pays you the money, and then walks off. And then he has a broken pear drop. He comes back and says, ooh, as part of this is broken. Can you replace this pear drop? And then you do that. And then the next time he goes to a different sweet shop and buys the different, because he's had a choice. So, well, I am. What I'm saying is, customer is someone who has a choice where they're going. I don't think the services that these are statutory services that we're providing to our residents. So I just wonder whether we're using the right. I'm not really too concerned about it, but I just wonder whether we're using the right terminology, saying customers, headline performance indicators, or should we say residents, electorate, resident? I mean, Emily, you're our legal person on this one.
Before I hand over to Councillor McCraw, who's itching to respond, I will say that this is a debate that has been going on for some time, and and you're aware of it, whether we call somebody a resident, a customer, or indeed a citizen. And I guess the answer is they're all three of those, depending on how an individual interacts with us. Sometimes they are a resident, sometimes they are a customer. But you've got to remember, not all of our services are statutory services. Some are discretionary services. So that is the point. I will now hand over to Councillor McCraw.
No, that's fine. I just think it's something I get asked quite a lot. Why do we call it customers? And why do we have a customer focus? And the simple answer is, and having worked in customer service all my life, customer service focused organisations tend to be more responsive, tend to be more flexible, and I mean there has been evidence proved, there have been studies made on how you approach things, and approaching from a purely what can I call it, bureaucratic viewpoint is not as effective in serving the people, the residents, the electors, whatever you like to call them. Personally, I think customers is the right way to go, and organisations that have provided good customer service tend to last longer and be more responsive. And I'm happy to defend that position, and I believe that's true of officers as well. It's certainly true of the people who answer our phones, because they treat those people that they speak to as customers, and that is a very important thing. They're not just there doing their duty or fobbing people off in any way. They are there to be responsive and to treat those people as importantly as a customer-led or any customer-led organisation would do. You look after your customers. That's what you do.
Thank you. We won't continue this any further. No. I just wanted to make a few comments. The overall performance indicators are all pretty much, nearly all of them, heading in the right direction, which really is good news, particularly given the couple of years we've just had to go through. I'm very pleased to see that the garden waste subscribers continues to increase. And that is something I really, really hope the government would take note of when they come to a decision as to whether they're going to meddle with that service or not. It is disappointing that the contamination of the recyclable material has increased, but we are awaiting the resources and waste strategy and the impact that's going to have on recycling and how that will change our recycling process. So I'm sure we'll be able to start addressing that considerably in the near future. Fly tipping down, which is good. I know there have been some pretty high-profile fly tipping incidents reported in the press and on social media recently, but we are on top of it, and one incident of fly tipping is one too many, but we will keep pursuing this and also, where possible, pursuing and prosecuting the offenders. On the customers side, I'm really pleased also that our online forms are a success. The chatbot service does seem to be very popular, and it just goes to show that an increasing number of our residents do like interacting with us online, and we're providing the right facilities to enable them to do that in an effective way. So that is excellent. So all in all, it's an improving and good position to be in. So I'm pleased with what this report contains. Does anyone else wish to say anything? Councillor Osborne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to sing the praises for housing, because obviously housing is very, very diverse and extremely challenging. However, these challenges are always met face on, and there's a commitment from all the team in housing to improve the service. For example, 47 cases of homelessness has been prevented. That's a fantastic figure if you consider what they've been subject to under COVID and now coming out of it. The close working with landlords, we initiated the central Suffolk lettings. That's been really, really successful. Increasing our housing stock, and I will be providing members with an accurate record of what we've got, I can assure you of that. And also, if we look at, we're doing a lot on bringing empty homes back into occupation. And also, if you look at 81% of disabled facilities grants spent and committed, if you compare that to 2.5 years ago, where only 35% of that budget was being spent, huge amount of work gone on that to promote that, and that's a fantastic outcome from that. So, great deal of work being done in housing under extremely challenging circumstances. So, well done to all the housing team. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Oh, sorry, Cass.
Sorry, Chair, just to come back on the
got a
second
response,
question
have you?
for Councillor
great.
Arthur.
Yeah, thank
Absolutely.
You. Thank you.
So yes, the water filtration system went in January. It was commissioned in February. We're waiting our first formal report back, but so far the readings are showing that it's actually working much better than anticipated, so a higher filtration rate. But I'll get some stats to you outside of the meeting.
Great, thank you for that. Okay then, Councillor Busby, you've got a...
Yes, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Jan on never missing an opportunity to boost housing team. Well done. You ought to be marketing manager. I'm sorry to have to go back to staff, but I kind of am. It worries me, particularly on the economic side, that we are missing opportunities by not having the right type of staff available. We've got 20 vacancies, I think it is, and we say that it could be down to salary, it could be down to the environment, it could be down to a number of things. But one thing that we don't talk about is the pool of labour that's available. And if you want to fill your vacancies without going into a competitive bidding war with rival councils on salary, you've got to increase the pool of labour that's available. What are we doing about it in terms of some of the particular areas? Why aren't we sponsoring planning courses, particularly in colleges and things like that? I mean, we need to be more proactive in this, otherwise we'll just end up paying more and more for less and less.
I will pass over to the Chief Executive in a minute, but you're right, we do need to increase the pool of labour, and it's partly to be able to increase the amount of training places at colleges or elsewhere, but also, of course, we need to provide the homes to attract people to come and live in the district. If we don't do that, then we're never going to be able to solve that problem. So we need our population to increase because we have the jobs for them to do.
We've got homes for people that live in,
We need to build more homes to get more people to do the jobs. Anyway, I'll pass over to the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. So specifically on the point you raised, Councillor Busby, about sponsoring for planning courses, we do, and we have been for years. So we both pay to put our staff through the degrees where they need to qualify as planners. We also send them on courses. We also use apprenticeships and internships as a way of developing the next generation through. Of course, as local government, we've got a real mixture of different types of roles that we need to fill. So quite specialist planners, licensing officers, where there may be a specific background or even qualification that people need to have, either unique to local government or more general. And then more general roles where you don't need to have had a background in local government at all, And so it's more about your personality, the skills that you possess, the type of person you are, rather than necessarily with the things on your CV in terms of specific qualifications. So we do an awful lot around developing the next generation. Of course, even where we do that, we're not the only council doing that. And so you will have seen that over time, all local government, it's not specific to us, but all local government is very good at pinching from fellow local government. So we've acquired a number of excellent officers from both Ipswich and Colchester in the past, for example. They're on our doorstep. We're easily commutable for people who would have worked there and happy to come and work across here. Equally, we've lost people the other way to East Suffolk. So it's quite a revolving door in that respect of local government, which is good, provides good opportunities, but it does mean that those opportunities also present a different challenge for us, which is around stability of the workforce, because people are able to move on and move up faster. So we do need to make sure that we're providing better on-site development for people. So there are things that we're looking to do in terms of, for example, management development programs for not just current managers, but the next generation of managers, and how we can expand that. But it's a constant battle, particularly, as I said earlier, in the current economic position, which is a good place, I suppose, but not for employers, whereby employees have got a real choice about where they want to work, whether they align to their cultures, their values, their salaries, the pensions and everything else that staff are, or potential staff are looking at. But just to give you that reassurance, absolutely are in that space. But even then, it is a battle. And certain professional areas, there is certainly a generational gap, if you like, in terms of, if you look, for example, at our building control surveyors, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, they're all of a certain age. And so it became, at some point in time, it clearly was not trendy to become a building control surveyor. And again, that's another area where we're focusing hard to bring through a next generation and then keep doing it, so that we don't just build up a problem for 15 years' time.
Thank you.
I mean, I hear what you say, Arthur, but it's... If the kids of today and the teenagers today aren't aware of the opportunities that are potentially going to become available, they don't consider it. How many people, if you ask any 16-year-old, how many would like to be in planning, they'll look you in the face and go, what? Planning what? I don't know anything about it. Local government is the second largest employer, probably, across the country. The second largest employer. What courses, what information is given to the students of today about local government in general and all the specific courses, jobs that are available in it? I'd say none. And that's why we're struggling to get the right kind of people. And as for your revolving door, what happens is we have 2 vacancies, we poach them off Colchester, so they have 2 vacancies. They poach them off Braintree, so they have 2 vacancies. That's the revolving door. The 2 vacancies are continually going round and round and round. We're not filling it.
Yeah. I think, Fiona, you wanted to comment on that?
If this is that working? Yeah. So I think you're right, and actually the public sector is a huge employer at a national level. We do quite a lot, so we field team members to job fairs, not just in the district, but also wider across Suffolk and Norfolk, and we work closely with the LET to promote the kind of jobs and careers that we have. And one of the joys of working for the public sector is you get a really diverse workload, and that's a message we've tried to send out, particularly as recruitment becomes more challenging. I will just mention the Curiosity Festival that we held in Stowmarket, and we're planning to hold shortly in Babergh. We're looking at the moment, later on in the summer, about potentially running a public sector one where we can exactly showcase those type of careers that we know are hard to fill, and get to the very youngest of people, so that we can make sure they start to think of that as a career option. Because I have to say, it's not really been classed as a career option by most people. It's something people fall into or get passionate about later on in their careers. So we're on it.
And as a final comment on this, we have got the Democracy Project, which is underway, Councillor Busby, and through that, part of that is engagement with young people on the wider subject of local democracy, but also we can expand that to include this is what your council does, and so give them an idea about the various kind of career opportunities. So, and I suppose there's always more that can be done to promote what we do and beyond what we're already doing. But there's a huge amount that, as Fiona said, that is already going on.
You've got 10,000 students going to college and university doing media studies in terms of how to become a disc jockey. Sorry, they don't call it that these days, a rapper or whatever it is, for the one job that's available. And yet there are no students going to college to deal with the hundreds of thousands of jobs that are available across the country on local government.
Well, schools do have their advisory services for students who are going off to college and university, and I'm sure that those services provide access to information about all sorts of careers that the young people may not necessarily know about when they're 15 or 16. And local government and planning particularly, and building control surveying, that sort of thing will fall into that category. But we're not going to solve it here today. But I take the point you're making. Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, I'm itching to come in here on this one because I think actually the market will get this right. What will happen is, rather than, and I think we hit the 50% of students going to university, I think what will happen is that when you get the opportunity and when the educational sector really wake up and start looking at the vocational qualifications that you can get in somewhere like a district council, so you get paid to learn. So ultimately, you leave the school or full-time education, you join a council on a programme, and at the end of the 3 years you've got the equivalent of a degree or whatever, and the whole period you're being paid for that. That's surely got to be more attractive than coming out with your £50,000 debt and having a degree which doesn't actually stand you in any good employment stand, which is what's happening. Let's go back to your media studies. But it will take time, and I think a lot of it's to do with the way that the education still channels so many people to university education, and it's not what the country wants. It's certainly what employers want all the time. So I think it will just be market, and we can't do it. But what we've got to do is make sure we have those vacancies well advertised, and we don't have a problem filling those vacancies, I assume, where we have them.
We do have a problem filling the vacancies purely because there's so many people out there so few people out there compared to the number of jobs.
I'm talking about the qualified, but the unqualified, the people coming in on the the NVQ. Well, I don't know what course we're offering, but on say a planning course, which gives you as a qualified planning officer your outturn, we wouldn't have a problem filling that course, would we?
No, certainly. As long, I would say this, but as long as we are paying appropriately, then we won't have a problem filling those roles. No, absolutely. Particularly where people want to stay local in terms of being able to deliver things rather than leaving the district, as it were, to pursue elsewhere. But they've got particular values and behaviours about giving back to communities. And of course, there aren't necessarily the degree courses in being a local government officer, but just to give another example, planners come from geography degrees predominantly. They don't have to, but there's an awful lot of jobs that don't need you to go to university at all to work for us. It's the passion, and it's that we need, that we can help develop once they're here.
We have digressed a bit, but it's been an interesting debate. But okay, I think that probably wraps it up for this. So this paper is for noting, and we'll move on to the next item, which is item 11, paper BCA 2144, Climate Change and Biodiversity Annual Report of 2021 to 22. And I'll invite the Cabinet Member for Climate Change to introduce the report. Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you very much, Chair. It gives me great pleasure to introduce BDC's first annual Climate Change and Biodiversity Report, which is more commonly referred to as the Environment Report. Biodiversity affects us all, whether we like it or not, and climate change also. Correcting the loss in biodiversity will go a long way to benefit climate change, because it's a kind of chicken and egg situation. The one is dependent on the other and vice versa. However, I recognise that there are those among us who, shall we say, are not keen on this green thing. And I hope this annual report will show just how intertwined we all are in climate change and biodiversity. So much so that it reminds me of the poem by John Donne, No Man is an Island. He writes about isolationism, and how everything is interconnected. Which is why I believe that this report should continue to be presented to you and the residents of Babergh on an annual basis. Putting together such a report demonstrates how everyone has pulled together on the common theme of improving our biodiversity net gain and its eventual contribution to climate change. It's been a long, arduous journey, but enjoyable, one that started back in 2019 with the declaration of the climate emergency, quickly followed by the action plan on biodiversity. But the awards and achievements, as you can see since then, are testament to the commitment of this council and all involved in getting us there, but especially to Cassandra Clements and her entire team. I therefore recommend that this report be noted and that Cabinet agrees that the report should be produced annually. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Arthey. Questions, anyone? Any questions on this report? Okay. Oh, Councillor Dawson.
Yes, sorry. The one I just wanted any idea yet to what the budget sort of really was, what it's, you know, expected to be, any ideas of whether we're going to generate any income and what the costings are going to be of this yet?
Thank you, Councillor.
It can, on the net gain of biodiversity, it's not been worked out yet, but you'll get more information on that if you'd read the report on the gas emissions, because there is a school of thought that we will be trading in. I'm looking at Cass because I can't remember the name for the thing.
Carbon credits. No. Carbon credits you're talking about?
Well, it could be carbon credits, because the same with trees as well.
If I come on to the point that Liz, I think you're making, is the work that we've done around the tree surveys will give us data that will enable us to understand the financial pressure of trees, not just the sequestration. So when we're talking about new developments and trees that are being taken away, we'll know financially what needs to be replaced, not just number of trees, for instance. So it will take into account their age and their sequestration rate. So I think that's what Liz is talking about in terms of money back in. The one thing that has been done so far was moving our leisure centres over to green tariffs and the filtration systems. So they will have brought about savings, although clearly they are for our partners as opposed to us. However, there is likely to be reduced management fees in the future because they'll see their bills coming down. What I will just give is a word of warning. Clearly the current crisis around fuel and the happenings with Russia and Ukraine at the moment, there's clearly lots of work going on to remove links to Russian fuel like Gazprom. So we just need a bit of word of caution about that. We don't have anything currently underway that sees a return to the council, but that's purely on the current plan. It doesn't mean that there's nothing coming forward.
Roughly, what is it we predict to spend on this in the next year, taking into account what's happening globally? There must be a sort of proxy.
Sure. So within the plans, there are around £200,000 to £300,000 worth of spend due to come in the next financial year. Clearly, that isn't. That's far more than what's in the Environment Reserve currently. But the team, Environmental Protection team and Environmental Management team, have been excellent so far in securing external funding, and that will be our first port of call for anything that we can't. So we are using money where we can from our own purse, but we're utilising all of the public funding that's available to us as well.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks. First of all, I think it's an excellent report. It's really in depth. I'm one of those people, although not sort of carrot-eating sandal open toes or whatever. You know, I do understand the importance of being green, and I live on, and I live on, you know, one of the councillors fortunate enough to live on the most beautiful part of Babergh District Council. So we understand the importance of being green, the environment, and everything that entails. But what I would ask, because again, living on the Shotley Peninsula, we do have an issue in terms of public transport. And I noticed there is reference in here to, you know, the Bus Back Better scheme, but I don't know if Councillor Malvesy's be able to give us a little bit more reassurance about that, and also the progress that's being made in terms of walking and cycling routes.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Malvesy, are you able to respond?
Bus Back Better. There is, I think the public consultation's finished and there's a report due to come out. Bus Back Better is mostly dependent on Canty, but there is a push to have local runaround buses.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd love to see more.
So you're pushing the buses away?
Well, Go Start is an example. But what we need to do is to turn these small runaround buses into electric vehicles, or take a leaf out of Aberdeen's book and have hydrogen-run buses, which, in my opinion, my personal opinion, would be far, far better. Cass, do you want to add anything to that?
Nothing at this point, but just to say I'm happy to talk to our Sustainable Travel Officer, particularly about the peninsula, but also the Bus Back Better scheme, and get an answer to you outside of the meeting.
And on the cycling and walking infrastructure plan, that will, and it's going to, certainly on the peninsula, there are a number of cycleways that are in existence already, both existing ones and proposed, but they're not all interconnected yet. But I think one of the aims is to be able to have a far more joined up approach to those, so that there is a more comprehensive network, and you can get from Shotley to Ipswich effectively, or Shotley to Brantford effectively, which I know would be of huge benefit on the peninsula. Council.
Sorry, I've worked a lot with other councillors and developers on producing that, because it's been a long time in the making, and we are getting closer. Yeah, the Shotley to Chelmer, the Chelmer to Wolverstone, the Wolverstone to Holbrook, the Preston bit. So there are still bits, but it's a case of, you know, we need to be a little bit sharper, I think, not just on the Shotley Peninsula, but through the whole district. Yeah, and one of the things, obviously, with introducing the car parking charges was going to be a part of the walking and cycling routes within that. So the sooner we implement the car parking charges, the better.
Councillor McCraw, we won't talk about parking anymore.
I wasn't going to, actually, but I wanted to draw Councillor Malvesy and officers' attention to the fact that the hydrogen bus scheme in Aberdeen, which is all the Aberdeen municipal buses, there's a published report available on that on the internet, which I've had a glance through. Worth a look anyway. I would think you can probably get more detail. And I'd suggest that with the way things are going at the moment, hydrogen might turn out to be rather more economic than it had looked in the past.
That's a fair point. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Are there any questions, Councillor Arthey?
Yeah, it's a question for you, really. Given the links between the parking strategy and the carbon reduction management plan, do these two now fall in different portfolios?
Yes, they do, because the carbon reduction management plan is part of our climate change portfolio, which is Councillor Malvesy, and the parking strategy still resides under the residual environment portfolio, along with other environment services such as waste, and that's Councillor Dawson.
Nice try. Thought so. Nice try. It wasn't a try for anything at all.
Okay. Questions? Councillor Busby, you got a question? Or are we moving into debate? We can move into debate now, I think. Good idea. Yes.
One of the points we're talking about in tree and hedgerow planting, in 2019, the Committee on Climate Change announced the need to plant 30,000 hectares of trees each year. Each year. 30,000 hectares. Is that nationally? Each year, nationally, yeah. And 30,000 hectares is about 65,000 acres. And I reckon you probably get probably 1,000 trees on there, but maybe at least 100. So you're looking at, what, 650,000 trees. And we, in the greenest part of the UK, have planted 281. It's not getting us very far to the 30,000 hectares, is it?
Believe it or not, Surrey's greener than Suffolk.
But not all of that 30,000 hectares is public land. There's going to be a lot of private land there. So in terms of... the point you're making, though, is that we've got to do better, yes. And I don't think any of us would deny that. We've just started on this process, and it's something that is going to build up, and we'll be working with our communities, with landowners to ensure that the tree planting in Babergh does provide its due share of that 30,000 per annum.
The biggest problem Babergh has is that we don't have the land.
We don't, no, but others,
but there
others
are
do.
a
We
lot,
work with them.
there's a lot of grants available to private landowners to create their own green canopy.
Sorry, it wasn't 30,000 trees, it's 30,000 hectares of trees.
Yes, yes.
I think we've got a target of 10,000 trees, haven't we? I thought it was 10,000 trees, Babergh. Sure we had that as one of our targets. Councillor?
Yes, do we have a specific target for ourselves as a district, or ambitions for the district as a whole?
No, so we've set our ambition to say that we want to bring in a tree management strategy which includes planting. We haven't given ourselves or have been given a figure for that. And what I will just bring our attention to, though, is that firstly, we've had the really successful launch of the Parish and Town Council project in terms of trees, and the response from them has been absolutely wonderful, and a particularly passionate response, I'd say, to giving up areas of their land to tree planting. So that's happening currently now. We've just employed our Biodiversity project officer who's going to take that on as a project themselves, so it's got its dedicated resource as well. So I know there was a probably unexpected response actually that overwhelmed the public realm team slightly, but we'll get back on track with that. So a fantastic response from them. Also that generated quite a few contacts from private landowners saying that they wanted to put their private land over to trees. So we've managed to put them in touch with places that have got grants for that kind of work as well. So lots going on at the moment in terms of tree planting. It's definitely just the start of our journey.
Thanks, Cass. Councillor Osborne.
From Little Acorns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is an excellent report, and I fully support it. One of the things that we do need to consider is, as we move forward 5, 6, 7, 8 years ahead, the maintenance of those trees that we're planting and the hedge cutting. You know, we've got trees in Sudbury, for example, that cost a lot of money to maintain them, even on a rotating basis. So we do need to take that into consideration. In regards to cycling and walking, I think we need to look more locally at what's already coming forward or already available. Now, for example, in Sudbury, we have the Gainsborough Trail. We've already put the first section of that, the Sudbury section, in, and the Chiltern section is to be opened in a few months' time. But funding isn't there for us. So I think district and county need to look where they're putting their funding. For example, to suggest a cycle route where they've done it for Melford Road is absolutely crazy. But that's where they're prepared to put their funding, whereas they could put their funding into the Gainsborough Trail to make it really walkable, really cycle-proof as well. And that's where we need to look, be a little bit more proactive with where we're putting the funding in regards to what's coming forward and what's already there available locally. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Osborne. Councillor McCraw.
I could just respond to that because it's a very good point. The local cycling, walking and infrastructure plan, LC WIP, the group we've been working on that for the last few months have just completed the draft report. It's a little bit of tidying up to do, and we are now prepared to send our LC WIP on to Suffolk County Council. This is a government initiative taking place across the country. We've been operating there. 2 members of this cabinet, in fact, sit on the LC WIP body, and it's now coming to a conclusion. Costs can be high, but we've basically managed to come up with the help of very good officers, and you'll note in the report we have a specific officer dedicated to this very subject. So we are, if you like, putting our resources to it. That's been supplied, the money for that's been supplied by central government, but we're making use of it. That's ready to go forward, and we have to integrate it with the overall Suffolk plan, but Babergh and Mid-Suffolk being a significant part of Suffolk, that should all integrate, and we should see, I would hope, some action taking place later this year.
Great. Thank you for that update, Councillor McCraw. Okay.
I can add it will be coming, the LC WIP report will be coming to this cabinet, and we've also agreed that it should go to, that's for not ratification, I suppose approval is what we'll be looking for, and then after that, just for information, to be noted by the council. And this has been discussed just this last week.
Thank you. I think this is an excellent report as well. I'm particularly pleased with Appendix B, the greenhouse gas emissions report. The breakdown of data about our emissions there is excellent, and also we'll be able to see how those emissions are reducing, so that we will meet our 2030 target of zero emissions, which is ultimately what this is all about. I think I'm very pleased with this first report, and look forward to seeing it again next year and in the years to come. If there are no further comments from anyone, then I'll now open up the vote for this. Henriette, can we start the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote is now in progress. Councillor Dawson? Thank you. Chair, that is 8 votes for and 1 vote against.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Right, moving on to the final item on today's agenda, item 12, paper BCA 2145, the response to National Grid's statutory consultation on the Bramford to Twinstead overhead line project. I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Planning to introduce this report. Councillor Arthey.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite simple, really. We've all had the opportunity to attend various briefing events. That's Cabinet and all of the other councillors on the council. We've got a response proposed for you here. And it's really just for you to agree or amend as necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Arthey. Any questions, anyone? Councillor Barrett.
Yeah, when this came before us, we had...
Sorry, need a seconder.
Oh,
Councillor Barrett, yeah?
Sorry, I'm second. Do you mind if I carry on talking? We had some recommendations of the proposals which were to continue, I think, with the recommendation which was the undergrounding and then overgrounding, the undergrounding within the A and B on the Twinstead, on the Bramford to sort of Leven Heath, and then under the OAMB coming up and then going on the other section on the Stour Valley. Is that basically what we're looking to recommend here, or?
Yes, it is.
But it's not in the recommendation, because there was like an A, B, and 1, 2, or 3. So I just wonder whether that would have been slightly stronger if we'd have had the. There was basically 3 options that were shown in the report. And I thought we were going to just try to firm up on the option that we felt was the preferred option. And I think we all agreed on it. I think
Yeah, and we've got the draft responses as the appendix, and that does refer to undergrounding, as Councillor Arthur says on page 131, and specifically on page 133, it talks about the removal of the current 132 kV line through the Devon Vale and also down at Still Valley. We've talked about other things that we in this report that we want to see National Grid address as well as that. The question is, do we believe that the response as it currently stands is one we want to submit? Do we want to add anything to it? Do we want to amend anything?
I think the response is fine. It's just that when it could have been easier because there was the three positions that came forward. And we haven't really, I mean, it is identified by the fact, but I wonder whether we could be a bit more specific and say this one.
By the three, you mean keep everything overground, put everything from Bramford to Twinstead underground?
No.
Or
there was the option that the National Grid came up. They had their own options within the paper that was presented, and those options they were listed, weren't they? And I just wondered whether we would be better if we. I'm quite happy to leave it to the AD to sort it out, but I just wondered it was quite clear the options available, which was the one that was the preferred route, I think, by National Grid. And the only thing that they weren't doing, which we wanted to do, was to take out the 132 line. They were going to leave that. They were going to leave that in position, and I think we definitely wanted that taken out.
No, they're definitely taking that out.
They are now,
yes.
Aren't they?
Because the second 400 kV line was to replace that 132.
Correct.
And in sections where it won't be going underground, then the 132 by necessity has to come down so the new 400 kV can be put up. But where it crosses the AOB and where it goes through the Still Valley, then the 132 will come down. Where it's replaced with underground sections.
Okay, I mean, yeah, he's in there.
Does anyone else have any questions? Councillor Dawson.
About this, it really isn't clear. It's in the areas where it's going through the areas AONB. In those areas, if there are the pylons going through, the issue doesn't seem to be addressed. Where you can see the pylons when you're in an area of AONB. And really, when you're in that area, that's the whole point of it. You shouldn't be able to see anything. And I don't think analysis has been done of that. It seems quite clear to me.
That's the whole purpose behind putting it underground, so that it won't be visible.
Yes, but in parts, some of the areas, I'm just concerned that if there's an AONB next to an area where it isn't, that transition, has enough analysis been done, and my understanding is it hasn't been, when I was asking questions, you can still see when it starts to go pylons above ground that those are visible when you're in an area of AONB, and that kind of, I would have thought, isn't really acceptable.
Well, that's not really what any of this was designed to address. It was designed specifically to address the visual impact within the AONB, on the AONB itself.
Yeah,
I understand the point you're making.
If you're standing well, I don't know, I haven't been to Bent, but if you're standing in an area, and I don't know exactly, but places like Benton End or going across the Stour Valley, if you're standing and you can see these pylons when you're in the AONB, that would suggest to me that it's, more should be underground surrounding those areas, which I don't think has happened.
I think that would kind of suggest a full undergrounding of the whole run, simply because...
I realise
if you're standing in an AONB, in many places you can have a sight line of 10, 15 miles and you'd still be able to see pylons, and so trying to address that would not really be feasible, but I take the point you're making. Councillor Davis.
Yeah, thanks. As the JAC member for Babergh on the AONB for both Dedham Vale and the Suffolk Coast and Heaths. I can assure councillors that a rigorous process has taken place with consultation. The AONB has made their position very clear in terms of what they would like to see in the Twinstead to Bramford pylon run. So everything has been done and said. They've spoken with all the energy suppliers involved, and so complete due process has been followed, and like I say, our thoughts have been very much accepted by the energy companies and James Cartledge as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Arthey.
Yeah, I accept the point that Councillor Dawson has made, and I think it's a good point. It was made quite early on, and that's the point about the impact on the AONB also involves views from within the AONB out and from outside the AONB into the AONB. And it was those early concerns, I think, that led to the proposals being changed slightly, where the ceiling end compounds, which are quite large areas of land and quite large structures, would be moved, rather than be on the edge of the AONB, they were further out of the AONB, so that the impact on the AONB wasn't so great. And there is a small part where, instead of crossing the AONB, the proposals now go around a sort of a sticking out block of AONB. I think it's worth saying that none of this is ideal, well, apart from the removal of existing lines, because there is an impact with undergrounding as well. It's not a no-impact solution, because you will end up with effectively a scar on the landscape, and it's the landscape you're seeking to protect, where there will be no buildings, nothing higher than a hedge. I think it will be an identifiable scar on the landscape. But really, we're stuck between sort of two extremes. One is we could say, no, we don't want them at all, and that's not going to get us anywhere at all. Or we could say, well, we've got pylons at the moment, you know, undergrounding is a scar, just like pylons. But I think what we're trying to do is minimise the impact. So that's saying that undergrounding has less of an impact than pylons above the ground. And if we can get the ceiling end compounds as far away from the AONB boundary as possible, that's an advantage. And if we can reduce the area that has any power lines at all, whether they're underground or overground, by going around the AONB, then that's an advantage as well. So, I mean, I don't think we can take a position where we don't agree with anything at all. I think it's a matter of having to accept that it's the least bad option. Yeah.
Yeah, I attended the National Grid exhibition at the Hadley Town Hall last weekend, and they were very, very helpful. They had a lot of people there, and I had a long chat with experts about all aspects of it: the ceiling end compounds, the construction and repair of landscape following trenching. I also spoke to an expert there on electromagnetic field emissions and the differences between those from overhead wires and underground cables, and how the attenuation of those fields with distance differs between the two solutions. So that the National Grid are trying to do their best to give as much information as possible. So I would urge anyone who wants to find out to go along to one of these exhibitions and talk to the people there. You'll get a huge amount of information from experts. There's lots of printed material. From my point of view, this ceiling end compound issue is one that I do want to raise, and I think that our report, I would like to see our report specifically addressed, and that is the eastern ceiling end compound of the AONB, which is currently sited or due to be sited in Polstead. There was an initial location which National Grid have moved following a consultation with the parish. but the new site is still not ideal. It is right next to a very attractive woodland, bluebell woodland. Access along a very narrow lane is not ideal. And Polstead Parish Council, and I agree with them, do want National Grid to reconsider and look at a third alternative location, and that is the old disused Layham Quarry pit, because the landscape there is such that it automatically offers seclusion and cuts down on the visibility of that ceiling end compound from a distance, whereas the earlier two locations don't. It would have been visible from quite a long way off, despite potential screening that they proposed with tree planting. The other factor to consider is that Layham Quarry site is located by a bespoke and purpose-built road from the A1071, a nice wide and straightened road which will allow the construction traffic easy access. So for all of those reasons, it would mean an extension of probably half a mile or so of underground cabling, but in terms of the mitigation of the impact on the countryside of the ceiling end compound, I would like to see us make a strong statement to propose that, or to recommend to National Grid that they consider this third location. Does anyone have any objections if we were to put words to that effect in our consultation response?
Just one little problem, and that is that you specified the Layham pit, and I don't know if necessarily we should mention that, because it may not be a suitable location, but certainly in the area of Layham pit is what you're saying.
In the area of Layham pit, then. Thank you, Councillor Arthey. Does anyone else have anything? Councillor Busby.
In the area of Layham pit, but not my back garden, thank you. Yes, I have my hour session with the experts this Friday at Hintlesham. I'm looking forward to that. Shan't understand a word they say, but there you go. I'm a bit disappointed in the report in a way, because I don't think it's strong enough. If somebody suggested that we built an M1 6-lane highway between, I don't know, Shotley and wherever, Cambridge, we'd say, what, you wouldn't put a scar like that across beautiful Suffolk. But here we are. We're sticking these great big pylons, and there are a lot of them across the area. We're not going to benefit from this at all. And where does it stop? We've had one lot of pylons, and then because we had the first lot, it's all right to put a second lot up. And now we're talking about another run from King's Lynn down to Essex. So there we go. Oh, they've got pylons there already. We'll stick another lot of pylons up. This is not acceptable for this particular area. This doesn't mention anything about under the sea, I don't think. I couldn't find it in this report. And bearing in mind that a lot of the energy that we're generating comes from either Sizewell or offshore, why are we bringing it onshore to transport it? Why isn't it going down under the sea?
You can raise that when you speak to National Grid, but there are technological as well as financial challenges to that because of the sheer amount of electricity that is going to be transported. You got to understand that with Sizewell and offshore, I think by 2050, something like that, about 30% of the UK's energy needs will have to come from Suffolk or off the Suffolk coast. The North Sea wind turbines in this area by 2050 are expected to generate something just a bit short of 40 gigawatts of electricity. A massive amount. Yeah, but that's their potential capacity. But you need to look at the amount of electrical energy that we're looking at over the next 20, 30 years. It's a huge amount. And that's set in the context of, I think, our total generating capacity in the country at the moment is only about 50, 60 gigawatts, something like that. So electricity requirements are going to increase by a huge amount, simply because we're moving away from other fuel sources. And most of that, or a huge part of that, is coming through Suffolk. And There are benefits to that because it's going to be hugely beneficial for the Suffolk economy, jobs and technology in the county. But the downside is that there has to be the infrastructure to transport that energy to where it's needed. And we're on the route between the North Sea and London, the North Sea and Midlands. We just got to work with this and agree options that mitigate as far as possible the impact on our countryside.
But the solutions are there. They can put the energy down underneath the sea because they do it. It's just a little bit more expensive perhaps than sending it through dear old Suffolk, or be quite happy to have all these pylons everywhere.
There are technology challenges as well. In terms of the amount of electrical energy that is
down one pipe, perhaps. Where
it won't be down
two
one
pipes.
Pipe, no. Councillor McCraw.
Para 4, I think, pretty much sums up where I stand on this, and I can see that I guess nobody likes overhead cables, but they exist, they have existed, and they will exist as long as people need electricity, because there are actually quite a number of reasons why you don't bury every cable under the earth. In fact, if UK power networks have a break in the overhead lines, that's one thing, but fixing a break underground is a great deal more difficult, and it actually contains considerable risk to the operatives doing it. No, they do actually break underground. I know because I can state this quite firmly because I've worked in the control centre that deals with such breaks in the transmissions. So I can state that categorically, that it happens. However, if we look at this overall, we have an additional 19 kilometres of new 400 kilovolt overhead lines, but we're removing, well, the consultation is removing 27.5 of assorted sizes. And the difference, of course, is that the 2.5 of that 27.5 is 400 kilovolt, the same size, the same capacity. 25 kilometres is 132 kilovolts. And it seems fairly clear to me is that we're upgrading the carrying capacity of the lines, and that is required simply because energy requirements across the country are rising. We're not developing this energy offshore for no purpose. It's going to go to houses, and people do want that energy. We are gaining 10 kilometres of underground cables through the AONB areas. It's capped at both ends and it exists outside the ends. The net effect, I believe, is positive. No, I'm just saying, but that's the thing. So the net effect is we're leaving officers flexibility to make our response on these broad principles. The Assistant Director, in collaboration with the Cabinet Member for Planning, will consider any proposed amendments. And all these points we've put in are towards that effect. So effectively, we are delegating the authority to those two people to make the amendments. And I'm quite happy to support that. I don't think we can do much more without arguing in circles.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, that's all. So if nobody else has anything that... Oh, Councillor Dawson?
Yes, I'm just... Have they done... my understanding is, and perhaps Councillor Ansell might be able to answer, there seems to be a lack of economic cost analysis for whole life comparisons. And the area I was thinking about was, say, between Leavenheath and Bures, over 50 years. Have they calculated what the difference in costs would be, you know, to that, say, small specific areas? I'm concerned about that particular area, not as my ward, but whether a life comparison cost has been made, which I think there should be.
Yeah, that's something that UK Power Networks would undoubtedly have worked out in their analysis of the solution options, but it's not something that our officers would be considering.
If we just say it's acceptable, can we not sort of say in that particular area, where it is an area of outstanding national beauty, what is the can they give us an idea? We shouldn't really be accepting it readily, should we?
And for what purpose?
Well, because if it's over 50 years, the same cost, then we'd have it underground rather than having pylons.
But they are putting it underground. But within the Store Valley section, and also the AONB section. So it'll be underground through Polstead as far as just the eastern part of Levenheath. Just it comes out just the other side of the B10 exactly. Yeah, that's where it comes out. Yeah.
It's overground, is it?
Yeah, just off the B1068 at Harris Street part of Levenheath. Yeah. Councillor McCraw.
Underground cabling is a great deal more expensive than overhead, and has been shown to be so many occasions.
Yeah, I realise that. But the point I'm trying to make here, sorry, Mike, you didn't. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Lawson. Yeah.
Well, my question hasn't been answered, or has it been? Was there an economic cost analysis for a whole life cost comparison in an area such as between Levenheath and Little Cornard, where it is going overground? I don't know, that's what I'm asking. But my understanding is it has not been done, and this is a flaw in part of this.
Well, the answer is I don't know, because there was never any suggestion or option to underground that particular section. It was never a consideration.
Well, I don't know, Councillor Arthur's in charge of overseeing this, and you might be able to answer rather than yourself.
So, Councillor Arthur, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in charge of it at all. I mean, our response, whatever response you want, and our leader has already suggested a slight amendment to what's proposed. I will agree that is the response with the AD responsible, Tom, who's not here today. So, I mean, I'm by no means an expert. I have attended all of the sessions that have been provided, and when I referred earlier on to the changes that have been made since the initial consultation, and I don't know how many of these sessions you've attended. The last one that we had was not very long ago, actually. Was it last week or the week before? And they've changed quite a lot since then, and I was just going to read you from their presentation what they said had changed. So their headline for it was "You said we did," and there are a number of bullet points. They confirmed undergrounding in the Dedham Vale, AONB and the Stour Valley project area. Confirmed a greater amount of undergrounding overall. I mentioned earlier on that they were now avoiding a small area of the AONB completely by going around it. A change to the route and configurations of pylons around Brantford substation, consideration of a further routing option around Hintlesham and Ramsey Woods, an alternative route of undergrounding to the east of the Dedham Vale, alternative route of undergrounding in the Stour Valley, relocation of 3 cable-end ceiling compounds, and that's what John was talking about earlier on. He was talking about the move of the one in Polstead and considers it hasn't actually been moved far enough. A further reduction, I've just got 2 more points that they put in their presentation. Further reduction of the existing 400 kilovolt line running south from Twinstead T, and greater use of full tension gantries at the ceiling end compounds to reduce the number of terminal pylons.
Yeah, that's
okay, so those are the changes that they've made since the initial consultation, which is albeit some time ago now, wasn't it, the original consultation?
Sorry?
Friday is
it's
the
still,
last
it's still,
public
yeah,
session.
there's a public sessions on Friday, so
That's
there are
right,
still
yeah.
options for individuals to contribute.
And I went to them.
Friday in Hintlesham is the last of the public consultations.
And I went to them, that's why I'm asking this question, because I was told that this should be brought up here this afternoon. That's why I'm asking it.
Sorry,
who suggested
Who told you that?
When I went along and spoke with them on Friday.
In terms of the
yes, and I was asking specifically about Levenheath to Little Cornard there, which is an area, or it's just the pilot, it's an AONB area, and that area I believe is underground. And I was asking them, and they were saying this was the sort of thing that could be brought up today and should be noted. I don't know whether we could perhaps, rather than just accepting that it's a given that all of this is And I understand a lot of it has to go underground, which I do, overground. I mean, I do understand that, but I just feel in this particular stretch, we should be pushing to try and get it underground because of where it is.
But it's not in the AONB.
No, but when you're in the AONB, you can see it. And so therefore, it's... Exactly.
So Councillor Dawson, you want us to make a second amendment to this paper to relate to that
yes, I think we should
Leavenheath
definitely.
Little Cornard section and ask
Yes.
that that goes underground because it's visible from the AONB.
Yes.
That is the point you're making.
Yes.
Right. I
And has a
understand that.
cost analysis, a whole life cost comparison been made? Because you'd probably find over 50 years, you know, it's not going to be actually probably that much more over a 50-year period. It might be a lot more. I really don't know. But that's the sort of thing. We should be, rather than accepting it, we should be pushing in this particular area. You know, I'm not parochial over Hadley, but I can see quite clearly in Leavenheath, this particular area here, we want to try and ensure that we maintain it.
Councillor McCraw.
I'm just a bit bemused why UK Power Network send you to ask Babergh officers to answer a question that only they can answer, like what the 50-year cost would be. It just seems to me a bit
I think
head over heels.
Yeah.
I think what Councillor Dawson is saying that it's things like this can be put into consultation responses, and if we wanted a statement in our consultation response, then she needed to raise it with us now today, which is a fair point. So,
let me just be clear, Chairman, the area that we're talking about, I think the area that Councillor Dawson is talking about is the area from the Ceiling End compound on the western end of the AONB, which is Leavenheath, yep. And the currently proposed overhead line to what I think is called...
Little Cornard Stroke Beers.
Yeah, the Store Valley East cable ceiling end compound, where it pops underground again. So you're talking about the length, basically, that goes through Assington, that's currently proposed overground, and you're saying that, or you're asking why that length couldn't be completely
I just think we should ask them to consider it. It's quite a large area. I've explained my reasons. It seems
okay,
quite
yeah, I haven't, I mean, I must admit, I haven't heard that question asked at any of the sessions that I've attended. I don't know if you attended any of the sessions, did you?
2 days ago, yes.
Sorry?
Yes, 2 days ago.
And did you ask the question?
Yes.
So what Councillor Dawson wants is for the two underground sections to be
Why don't you just
joined.
sort of say, yes, why, I don't know why we're making such an issue about it. It's just a really straightforward point I'm trying to make here. You know, as I think Councillor Busby has said, we shouldn't really be accepting the sort of ploughing of all this through areas of A and B. I'm not quite sure what the argument is. Again, it's, you know, they might not put it in, but if they do, it's to our benefit because we don't want to ruin these beautiful areas, do we? It's crazy.
I think the way to phrase this, do we want a second amendment that requests the two sections of underground line to be joined together so that there's a continuous underground line from east of the AONB through to west of the Stour Valley, because the bit in the middle is visible from both of those protected areas, and consequently by putting the whole run underground would improve that visual impact from within the two protected areas.
As a consultation response, that's not unreasonable.
It's not, no.
And I think the residents who on the verge of the AONB, and this is the point Councillor Dawson making, they're still seeing it. The fact it's not in an AONB, it impacts the AONB on its visual thing, and certainly in planning, visual impact on an AONB is something that we take into consideration.
We do.
So that's a perfectly sort of valid point. So I think if we could just find some wording just to put in there, I think it would be sensible to take that approach. I mean, it's not, is it likely that it would form? But I think from our residents there, that's what surely they would expect us to put in.
I think you're right. Councillor Osborne.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. However, my concern is obviously when we go underground, there can be some impacts on those particular communities. So I think in regards to this particular area, I think we need to know if it was to go underground, what would the impact be on that particular area by doing it? You know, we only had that discussion a few months ago where, yeah, it's great, put everything underground. That would be the best solution. However, there are impacts to putting them underground as well as going overground. So I think we need to make that clear in our response.
Yeah, all of the
We need to
communities
know the
have
impact.
construction traffic implications, and there'll be the construction of haul roads across countryside during the construction of the underground trenches, but those haul roads will then be removed. So the impacts are not inconsiderable, but they are temporary. Councillor Arthur.
Chairman, can we just be clear about, I mean, I know you haven't put it to a vote yet, but just be clear about what this proposal is. Because the current proposal is that after the underground section through the AONB, there is then a new 400 kilovolt overhead line routed to the south of the existing 400 kilovolt line, okay, replacing the existing 132. So I'm not quite sure what we're suggesting here. Are we suggesting that the existing 400 can stay and that there should then be an underground 400?
Yeah, well, that's what's happening through the...
Alongside it or something?
That's what's happening through the AONB and the Stour Valley project
but
area.
Is that what...
That's what's happening. Yeah, and what Councillor Dawson is requesting is that happens also in the section between the two proposed underground sections, so that there is one continuous underground run, effectively from Polstead to Bures. We have to remember, you raised an interesting point, we have to remember that the existing 400 kV lines will remain. They will not at any point along the route be removed.
No.
Well, do we know what?
So
it's not part of the proposals. They're only talking about...
If you're digging a trench the size of a cricket pitch, you might as well put 2 lines down there.
You'd have to dig a wide trench twice as wide.
It's
already wide enough.
Twice as wide?
Yeah.
Really? I don't know.
Electromagnetic effects.
It's enormous.
You have to have separation underground.
What did they bring in from Broad?
Anyway, I think we've pretty much had a good debate about this. I think what we'll put to the vote is the paper we have with the 2 proposed amendments, and that Councillor Arthey will work with Bron and also me, because I got the wording for the ceiling end compound one, to have the final wording for an amended paper.
can we say that what we're looking at is that we're asking them to reconsider the siting of the Polstead ceiling end compound, and we're also asking them to reconsider the possibility of undergrounding between the 2 ceiling end compounds, where to the west of the AONB, that's 11 Heath 1, going down to Little Cornard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think if we can leave that delegated to the officers to do it, you don't need to come back. I think that
No,
makes
it will
sense.
be, yeah, we delegated to Bron so she can put the final
that's
touches.
sensible. I think basically we've got a principle established. That's where we stand, and I think we need to just.
Okay.
It doesn't need to come back anymore.
We'll now put that to the vote, please, Henriette.
Thank you, Chair. The vote is now in progress on your app. Councillor Busby. Thank you. Chair, that's 8 votes for.
Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. That brings today's meeting to a close. The next meeting scheduled for the 4th of April at 2 p.m.